When I think of June, I think of roses. Rather lovely rose, I think, called Lady Hillingdon. Lady Hillingdon, born in 1857, was the wife of the second Baron Hillingdon. They married in about 1886 or so. And she was apparently passionate about roses. This portrait of her by Sir Frank Dixie, painted in 1905 when she was 48 or so. And 5 years after the portrait was painted, the breeders named their new tea rose after her. Her passion for roses was not, however, translated into passion for her husband, and perhaps apocryphally maybe, but anyway, in her journal of 1912 she is reputed to have come up with a phrase which is now quite familiar, and I paraphrase for the sake of this family show. When I hear his steps outside the door, I lie back, close my eyes and think of England. Following Bertie up, I just must pause by this great and beautiful version of the wild Scotch briar. Lovely. This is Rosa spinosissima, double yellow. And an abundance of flower. This I saw at Dartington Hall Gardens years ago, and I was really taken with it. Now just above the Scotch burnet rose is a climber from the Andes, and I think the pink colour complements the rose's yellow rather well. It is a very vigorous, scrambling shrub, and it's gone right up into my Chinese sassafras. It is about 12 feet up. With the Scotch burnet rose in the distance, I can show you this rather unusual tree. It has turned into a very big tree, and it's called Neolitsea sericea. Now the thing about the Neolitsea is that it has these rather droopy new growths. And many is the visitor that has asked me whether I've, by mistake, poisoned it. And I have to tell them, no. That is actually how it grows. I leave it to you to decide whether it's an attractive feature or not. Lovely Buddleia. This is Buddleia colvillei, the form Kewensis, which has bigger red flowers, but the flowering this year has been rather pathetic compared with last year, where the flowers were really abundant. But this grey foliage sets off the flowers beautifully. Now I understand that this grey leaf form was found by Roger Clark at Greenway Garden in South Devon, and the normal Buddleia colvillei Kewensis has green furry leaves, and here in fact are the rough textured furry leaves of the green form of Buddleia colvillei Kewensis, which unfortunately is not flowering, so I can't compare the flowers with you. But as you can see, the grey leaf sets off the flowers beautifully And this, I would think, doesn't quite so well if the flowers are just the same. Walking along past the Mathiasella, which we've seen before, and which the bees are loving, buzzing all over it. I just want to show you this bearded iris, which is one of my favourites, and it's called Jane Phillips. The Jane Phillips, after which this iris is named, was the daughter of an eminent surgeon in New Hampshire, USA, who in the 1930s and 40s, as a sideline, all obsessive sideline, started breeding bearded irises, and this was one of them, and he was Dr. Robert, or Bob, Graves, a rather stern gentleman, as befits an eminent surgeon. This was first flowered in 1946. I had a patient called Jane Phillips some years ago, lived to be 106. I remember we had a 105th birthday tea for her, to which I was invited. Amazing woman, a farmer's wife from Exmoor, so obviously a tough breed. Looking up from our new pond and the running water of the rill, I noticed the Photinia is absolutely full of flower. This is quite a rare Photinia called Photinia prionophylla, and it's got great big crinkly leaves. This has a certain stately quality about it, and certainly flowers extremely well. Coming up to it, we'll have a look at the foliage. I have to cut it back quite severely. It has got to be an enormous tree, but I must say the leaves are really lovely, crinkly. Lurking behind the Photinia is a lovely rose, one of my favourites. This is the Chinese rose, Rosa chinensis, Mutabilis. Mutabilis because it changes from a deeper pink in the bud and the new flowers to a pale pink as they mature. And the new growth is a gorgeous red colour. It has the rather dubious distinction of being one of the parents of the rose beloved of suburban housing estates of the 1970s, called Masquerade, which had this habit of changing colour as it matured, but in a rather, I felt, hideous way. This, however, is just lovely. Now is the time when some of the later flowering horse chestnuts come out, and this one is a version of the Indian horse chestnut, Aesculus indica, and the best flowering form of it, called Sydney Pearce. This was a very free flowering form, discovered at Kew Gardens by the assistant curator at the time, 1935, who was called Sydney Pearce, and so this cultivar was named after him. It is a magnificent flowering tree, no doubt, and the leaves are much more refined, should I say, than our native horse chestnut. Tucked in a corner by the round temple is a charming small rhododendron, still fairly young, called yuefengense. A beautiful pale pink, and the leaves are amazingly paddle-shaped and tough looking. I came round here because I wanted to have a look at the Cotoneaster, from China, Kewensis Mutabilis, flowers now, and I think we'll have quite good berries. But then my sense of smell told me there was something else going on here. And indeed there is. There is this wonderful Styrax, highly scented bells, substantial flowers, because this is a form of Styrax japonicus, which is called Emerald Pagoda. And if you look up, it's formed a very tall tree, and there's a complete mass of scented flowers right at the top, which of course the bees are loving. And here we have another Styrax japonicus, this time with a purple new growth really, and a sort of purpley brown tinge to the leaves. This is Styrax japonicus purple dress, appropriately enough. These scented flowers have these purple stems from which they dangle, most attractive. And there is probably a rhododendron for every month of the year if you put your mind to it. And nestling amongst Fuchsia Magellanica alba and the Styrax is Rhododendron diaprepes, considered by some people to be a form of Rhododendron decorum, but it flowers quite a bit later here in this garden. Lovely scent. A parent of the well-known later flowering hybrid called polar bear. If you want some colour in June, can't beat an azalea. This one is called Fireball, rather appropriate. I think it's set off nicely by the dark red of the Acer. Unfortunately, you don't get the amazing glowing that you get in real life on this video, but I think you get the general gist. Here is an enormous fuchsia bush, and you can see the sort of size it is with Bertie there. Absolutely dripping with flowers. I'm not entirely sure, but I think this is called Papoose. And I must say, 10 foot is quite a stunner. I was going to have a look at my favourite horse chestnut, which is not actually fully out yet, but I was arrested by the fantastic sweet scent of this shrub, which I've known as Abelia mosinensis, but which now apparently is Abelia, something completely unpronounceable, which I will write on the screen for you to attempt to pronounce, and this could become some sort of a party game. I thought I'd show you this still young plant of an attractive evergreen magnolia, bred by Vance Hooper, the excellent hybridist in New Zealand. It's a hybrid between Magnolia figo, which is a bit tender, and Magnolia leavifolia, which isn't. And it's called, rather bizarrely, white caviar. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think in time it'll form quite a nice small tree, and it's full of buds. Many more flowers still to come.